Hey everybody, John Felt here. This is the Blue Water Outlook Weekly Weather Briefing for the 18th of October 2025. Well, a couple areas I'm focusing on. I'm focusing on the central U.S. for some needed rain. I'm focusing on the western U.S. I think that's going to be the biggest story with atmospheric river that's going to produce a lot of heavy rain and snow at higher elevations. So let's get started in today's briefing. Well, first of all, let's focus on some of the threats across the nation. This is the area down here in yellow. That's where we could have some severe storms and some very heavy rain. But the focus is going to be in the West Coast, particularly Washington and Oregon coast, maybe down into Northern California coast, for an atmospheric river that's going to be multiple pulses, and that's going to bring that heavy rain and snow. Now in the central U.S., we need some heavy rain, we need some widespread rain, we need frequent rain because many areas are in drought. I've been talking about that, I've been focusing on that. And what we have here is this black line is the axis of where the heaviest rain is going to fall. The southeast also needs some heavy rain, and you can see that not as much rain in that area, so that's not going to be much help this week. But over the central U.S., that heavy rain is going to fall right over areas of moderate or severe drought. Now last week in that area of severe drought, southeast, middle part of the U.S., Ohio River Valley, no rain at all, very quiet. But it was definitely quite warm. We've had a delayed fall in many spots. Take a look at Kansas, for example, 10 degrees or more above normal for the weekly average. The western U.S., California in particular, below normal, but a large, broad part of the central U.S., very mild weather last week. Matter of fact, if we look at the warmest weather of the week, look at Kansas here again at 85 to 90, a few spots even in the 90s. Anything in yellow made it into the 80s, so you wouldn't expect that as we get into the latter part of October. Okay, so when we look at the dew point, we have moisture streaming ahead of a boundary. That boundary here, right in here, this stationary boundary, this area of low pressure is going to move along it. Moisture streaming in from the Gulf of Mexico, and that's going to, the low is going to provide the lift. We have the moisture, so that's going to give us some heavy rain along that boundary. So we do have the risk of some rivers, and when I say rivers here, I think I'm talking mainly about smaller tributaries, some urban flooding, flash flooding, and soil moisture recharge along this blue shaded area here. But main stem rivers really are being impacted by the drought. This is the upper Mississippi, this is the Ohio, this is the lower Mississippi. And note how it's dropping now into this brown area, and that's very low flows, and that's going to disrupt fall harvest transport. Barge traffic will have to be reduced. So we definitely need the rain. So we're going to get some rain, and it's going to be because of this system here. This system's ejecting out. This is going to give us our low pressure at the Earth's surface. And by the middle of the week, that has pushed off to the east, but we have this big area of low pressure, so we're going to have some cooler air behind it. But look at the western U.S. We're going to have this flow coming in from the Pacific, and that's going to enhance rain in that area. And if we look at next Saturday, that low is still there, focusing moisture inland. So like I said, Washington coast, Oregon coast, Northern California, quite active all week long. Now the middle part of the U.S., after that low passes, by the end of the week, the high builds again. Okay, so let's talk about temperature. Let's talk about rainfall. First of all, temperature. And if you take a look here, you can see a lot of red still. So we're not done with this mild weather. Behind this low, it's going to cool down over the central U.S., but it looks like by the end of the week, it's going to warm up again. And then as we round out the month, it looks like normal to a little bit above normal temperatures in many areas. But like I said, a bit of a cool down this week. This is Wednesday, blue being the cooler air. And Chicago's a good example, 75 degrees today, but much more seasonal, 50s and 60s the rest of the week. Okay, now the hurricane season's ramping down. I've been putting out information on that. Wanted to show you there's a little bit of talk about the Caribbean And it looks pretty quiet here. I guess if you're going in a cruise, certainly monitor it. But other than that, it looks like no activity for the U.S. this week. Okay, so we talked about temperature. Now let's talk about rain or snow. Two areas, like I started the briefing. Let's talk about the Pacific Northwest. Heavy rain, higher elevations, heavy snow, and then in the middle part of the nation, this very narrow stripe. And when we're looking at recharge into rivers, well, you got two things. Not just heavy rain, but it has to be widespread. This is not widespread enough. It'll put a couple bumps on the rivers. Those will attenuate, so it's not going to end our low flow concern, but certainly it'll help recharge soil moisture, and in a few spots, it's going to alleviate conditions. Let's talk about snow, and like I said, the higher elevations of the western mountains look like they're going to get some heavy snow, Cascades, Sierras, Rockies. That's what we would expect this time of year. Now let's look a little bit further out into week 2, right in here. Well, look at that. We're going to warm up again in many areas. Now the only area that's going to be below normal will be the west. Everywhere else above normal temperatures, and that atmospheric river, that upper low, goes into the week 2. So that's going to be a significant event, I think, and prolonged. Okay, and finally, I'll put this out in a post this week, but I wanted to show you, give you a peek at the November outlook. Here you go. Take a look at it for your area. That's this week's briefing. Take care. Have a great week.